Stranger Things has a long, fascinating timeline, and we're about to break it down, so be sure to subscribe, and let's get into it. Back in the late 1940s, secret defense work starts pointing at something nobody can fully grasp, and a survivor's son grows up pulling at that same thread until everything unravels. By the 1950s, that obsession gets a name, a lab, and a plan. Meanwhile, in town, a family called the Creels moves into a house that's supposed to be their fresh start. It doesn't work out that way. Their son Henry starts changing in ways that turn ordinary family life into something unbearable. The pressure finally explodes over a single weekend in March 1959 when a dinner table transforms into a crime scene, and Hawkins files what happened as something too disturbing to explain properly. Afterward, Dr. Martin Brenner takes custody of Henry, labels him 001, and starts building an entire program around the concept that a human mind can reach further than anybody thought was possible. On Saturday, March 14th, 1959, stretching into Sunday, March 15th, the Creel house goes eerily silent for reasons the town struggles to process. Henry's mother and sister die with the same horrifying signature, and Victor Creel gets arrested while he's still in shock. He ends up at Penhurst and gets told his son died in a coma. That's a lie, though, one designed to cover a far more sinister truth. Brenner suppresses Henry's abilities with a device and launches into years of testing that treats his life like a series of checkboxes. From that point forward, the lab years start filling in. Project MKUltra gets sanctioned in 1953. Hawkins High opens its doors in 1952, and by the 1960s, the newspaper, the police, and a growing town create a normal-looking surface over a completely different reality that's breaking open underneath. On some unknown day in 1970, Terry Ives participates in MKUltra while she's pregnant. The baby they tell her she lost actually gets taken away in secret. Despite being named Jane, the lab stamps her with the label 11. Throughout the 1970s, Brenner tightens his control, expands the subject list, and keeps Henry locked down under soteria. In early September 1979, tests that look routine on paper start shifting. On Friday, September 7th, 11 wins a lab game against a stronger subject. The beating she takes from the others afterward pushes her toward the only person who seems to offer an escape route. On Saturday, September 8th, she removes Henry's implant, and the building becomes a massacre site. She stops him short of complete destruction by hurling him through an opening into the other place, then collapses from the strain. That choice creates two separate tracks at the same time, a hunter evolving on the far side and a girl the lab will now treat as a weapon instead of a child. On Sunday, November 6, 1983, Hawkins transforms in one night. During a remote viewing session, 11 touches something predatory. A gate rips open at the lab, a creature crosses over, a scientist dies. A boy named Will Byers rides home in the dark and never makes it to his front door. Power surges hit neighborhoods in East Hawkins. Inside the lab, the breach grows into walls and vines that nobody can explain away with a maintenance report. 11 eventually escapes and disappears into the town that's now part of the same problem the lab created. On Monday, November 7th, Joyce Byers files a missing person report while agents tighten the perimeter at the lab and cordon off a contaminated wing. A kid with a shaved head walks into Benny's Burgers, eats, and gets hunted minutes later by people calling themselves social services. Hopper finds Will's bike in the woods and starts making the case personal. Mike Wheeler, Dustin Henderson, and Lucas Sinclair meet 11 and keep her hidden in a basement that becomes their command post. The radio in that basement starts reaching past the barrier between worlds. On Tuesday, November 8th, the kids discover what 11 can actually do. She moves objects without touching them, flips a Dungeons & Dragons board, and uses a single word that reframes the entire search: hiding. Will is hiding where the monster lives. That same night, Nancy Wheeler goes to a small party and loses track of Barb Holland at a backyard pool. A shape pulls Barb under in a place that looks like Hawkins but sounds completely wrong. The lab's field team sweeps the Byers shed and finds residue they can't show on TV. By morning, the town holds an assembly for a missing freshman, while the lab rewrites the truth. On Wednesday, November 9th, the case gets far darker. Nancy realizes Barb didn't come home. Jonathan's camera becomes evidence for a fight he never asked for. Joyce strings up lights and paints letters on the wall so her son can communicate with her. It seems insane until it actually works. 3 letters appear in sequence and form a single command: run. The wallpaper bulges with a hand that clearly isn't human. Down at the quarry, state police pull a body they claim is Will Byers, but it's not. On Thursday, November 10th, the cover story starts crumbling. 11 uses the school's radio rig to let the boys hear Will. Hopper forces his way into the coroner's office and cuts open the staged body. It's foam and padding. At the lab, a soldier on a line goes into the gate and doesn't come back. Joyce sees a mouthpiece down her son's throat through a patch of wall that opens and closes on its own. The pattern becomes simple now. The town searches, the lab lies, the kids build, the mother refuses to quit. On Friday, November 11th, the funeral happens for a boy who's not actually dead. Hopper rips the bug out of his trailer light and teams up with Joyce. The kids try to find the gate with compasses and argue when 11 redirects them. Nancy slips through a thin spot and sees a landscape that repeats her town in dead colors. By night, the plan comes together. The group will construct a tank, sink 11 into the void, and find both Barb and Will from the school. Across Saturday night, November 12th, into Sunday, November 13th, everything comes together in one thread. Joyce and Hopper cut a deal to enter the lab and pass through the gate. Nancy and Jonathan set traps at the Byers house. Steve shows up angry and ends up swinging a bat at a thing that bleeds but doesn't go down easily. Agents storm the school. 11 kills to protect the boys. The Demogorgon enters and gets pinned to a wall by a power that finally meets some level of resistance. It breaks apart as dust as 11 vanishes. Joyce and Hopper drag a tube out of Will's throat in the other place and restart his breathing. The boy wakes up in a hospital and returns to friends who can't explain what they witnessed. Then weeks later, he coughs up a small living thing in a bathroom sink and doesn't tell anyone. On Sunday, November 13th and through the winter, Mike tries the radio every day. Hopper leaves Eggos in a box. By late December, the boys play D&D again. Nancy hands Jonathan a replacement camera, and the town pretends normal has returned. It hasn't, but the act of it buys time and normalcy before the tides inevitably turn darker. 11 isn't dead, but she's lost. She crawls out of the other side near the school and lives in the woods until Hopper finds her and hides her in a cabin with rules that keep her safe but isolated. Under the lab, a secondary entrance to the gate keeps breathing, so the new director burns it on a schedule and calls it containment. On Tuesday, October 30th, 1984, a new school year resets relationships nobody's ready to give up. Max Mayfield and her stepbrother Billy Hargrove arrive in Hawkins. Mike keeps trying the radio. Hopper tracks crop rot that forms perfect circles around the lab. Joyce keeps appointments for Will that label his visions as trauma, when they're actually more than that. The lab culture feels softer under Dr. Sam Owens, but the system he runs is holding back a flood with a blowtorch. On Wednesday, October 31st, 1984, the kids go out in costumes and Will sees a thing the group later labels the Mind Flayer. It towers in clouds and keeps showing up in his drawings. Dustin finds a small creature in a trash can, names it Dart, and brings it into the group like a pet. 11, stuck in the cabin, reaches out to Mike through the void and watches a living room that used to be hers without being able to enter it. Steve and Nancy break under the weight of last year. The town gets ready for trick or treat, while a dark tunnel system grows under their streets. On Thursday, November 1st, Hopper maps the blight and forces the lab to pay attention. Dart escapes at school and proves that the thing in Dustin's hands was never a simple pet. Will goes under in a vision, and the Mind Flayer overtakes him while he's frozen on a field behind the building. 11 fights with Hopper, finds a box in the cabin with her mother's file, and decides to reach for the truth that was kept from her. By night, the pieces are all moving. The lab learns heat hurts what's growing under the town, the things from the other side. The kids learn that their secrets work until they don't. Joyce learns Will is connected to something that will use him against them. On Friday, November 2nd, the storylines cross paths fast. Nancy and Jonathan get pulled into the lab and record what Owens admits off the record. Joyce and Hopper tape Will's drawings together into a map of tunnels that looks like a living organ. Hopper follows that map into the field and ends up trapped by the other side's vines, pinned and suffocating under a living web. Bob Newby shows up, reads the pattern in a way nobody else could, and guides Joyce to the exact patch of earth where Hopper is stuck. They find him alive, coughing and covered in spores, and carry him out. The lab responds by burning the network to cut off the hive, and Will screams because the network is part of him now. 11 slips through the void to visit Terry Ives, watches the catatonia and the buried memories, and realizes she has a sister somewhere out there. Dustin goes home and finds Dart with the family cat in its mouth, a moment that makes clear this creature is no harmless pet. On Saturday, November 3rd, plans move into motion with little margin for error. Dustin traps Dart in the cellar and recruits Steve because there is no one else to call. Lucas tells Max the truth and faces the town's judgment until she sees the evidence for herself. Jonathan and Nancy find Murray Bauman and shift strategy from exposing everything to publishing the parts the public can accept. 11 leaves to meet Kaylee, seeking answers and a way to turn pain into precision. Joyce, Bob, Hopper, Will, and Mike use the tunnel map to reach another patch of the network, coordinating timing with the lab's plan. When the lab torches the network later that day, Will collapses like someone flipped a switch. The truth becomes undeniable. It is a hive mind, and it is in him. Burning the network hurts the people connected to it as much as it injures the thing they are trying to stop. On Sunday, November 4th, the lab tries to treat Will like a patient and a threat at the same time. It doesn't work. The Mind Flayer uses him as a listening post to bait soldiers into the tunnels, then kills them with a pack of demodogs and sends the rest toward the lab. Dustin and Steve discover that Dart molted and escaped. The group meets at a junkyard, only to be spared by a recall order from the hive that drags the pack away. Across the state line, Kaylee trains 11 to turn pain into focus and points her toward revenge against former lab staff. 11 refuses to kill a man in front of his kids, then sees a vision of Mike and Hopper in danger and heads home. On the night of Sunday, November 4th, into Monday, November 5th, the lab falls. Power cuts. Doors lock. Dr. Owens tries to move people through a security plan designed for a much smaller problem. Bob goes alone into the dark to reset breakers, clears a path, and dies in front of Joyce, while demodogs rip through the lobby. The group regroups at the Byers house, hides Will in a camouflage shed, and uses heat and memory to burn the Mind Flayer out of him. In the middle of that fight, the door opens at the lab, and 11 steps out of an elevator into a corridor choked with bodies. She's back. On the same day, the plan splits in two. Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy take Will to Hopper's cabin to cook the thing out of him with space heaters. Hopper and 11 go to the bottom of the lab to close the gate. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Max, and Steve set a fire in the tunnels to pull the pack away from the gate and give 11 a shot at shutting it. The timing is very tight. Flames crawl across roots underground. The pack turns, responding to the attack. Hopper stands with a rifle, while 11 screams against a wound in the world and forces it shut. The demodogs drop lifeless. The lab winds down to zero. The town keeps moving as if none of this happened. A funeral for Barb comes late but finally happens, and Owens hands Hopper a birth certificate that makes Jane Hopper official. On Saturday, December 15, 1984, the snowball happens. The camera pulls back from slow dances and corsages to a sky where the mind flayer still hovers over the school in the other place. The threat hasn't disappeared. It's just waiting for another shot. On Friday, June 28, 1985, the summer run-up to the 4th starts with something nobody in Hawkins voted for. The Soviets open a secret base under a brand new mall and power up a machine called the Key. The first activation triggers an outage across town and wakes a loose shard of the mind flayer in a steel mill. Dustin returns from camp with a radio tower and a code. Steve and a new coworker, Robin, scoop ice cream on the surface while Russians in uniforms open a new gate downstairs. Rats start to explode and melt into raw material. Billy gets taken on a dark road and wakes up inside a mind that's no longer entirely his own anymore. On Sunday, June 30th, magnets stop working on fridges around Hawkins and Joyce starts asking the right questions. Nancy and Jonathan chase a rat problem that's about more than rats. Dustin shares the intercepted Russian message with Steve, and Robin cracks it by matching a tune to a ride inside the mall. 11 and Max bond on a day out that makes room for the friend group to shift. By night, Heather Holloway is gone, and Billy delivers her to the thing building a body from whatever it can harvest. On Monday, July 1st, 11 and Max follow the thread from a nightmare and walk into a house where everyone's smile feels wrong. Joyce drags Hopper back into the old lab and runs into a Russian enforcer named Grigory. He beats Hopper in the dark and escapes. Mrs. Driscoll eats fertilizer and ends up at the hospital. In the mall, Robin maps the code to loading bays. Outside town, a fair goes up while a conspiracy gets ready to meet it. On Tuesday, July 2nd, the group runs a sauna test. Billy can't stand the heat because the thing inside him is weak to it. He breaks the door down and nearly kills 11 before Mike charges in and gives her an opening to throw him through a wall. In the mall, Dustin, Steve, Robin, and Erica ride a disguised elevator into a base they didn't believe existed until the doors open. At Town Hall, Hopper leans on Mayor Klein and confirms what the map of shell companies already shows. The Soviets bought up property all around the power plant. On Wednesday, July 3rd, Hopper and Joyce kidnap a Russian scientist named Alexei and drag him to Murray Bauman for translation and cherry Slurpees. The older kids end up at the hospital with Tom and Bruce, editors who aren't themselves anymore. When both men die, their bodies melt and form a larger thing that chases Nancy until 11 arrives and throws it down the hall. Dustin's group watches the Key spin up a gate underground and realize the mall's a cover for an invasion that already started. On Thursday, July 4th, everything hits at once. Grigory tries to set a trap at the fair. Steve and Robin get drugged and interrogated. Dustin and Erica drag them into ducks to escape. Nancy, Jonathan, and the kids regroup at Hopper's cabin while 11 reaches through the void and sees Billy, promising conquest. The mind flayer leaves the mill as a monster built from human parts and goes looking for her. It finds the cabin, wounds her leg, and forces a retreat to a closed store where fireworks become weapons. In the mall, the Russians corner the kids until a car flips across the pavement and a group that hasn't been together in months finally stands in one place. 11 rips a living piece out of her leg and loses her powers with it. Beneath Starcourt, Joyce and Hopper reach the Key and turn two locks while Murray sprays fire across a pit of creatures in a prison far away. Susie reads out the Planck constant over a radio as a code. Billy breaks free long enough to shield 11 and die on that floor to save her. Joyce turns the keys. The machine explodes. The gate shuts. The mind flayer's body collapses. Hopper vanishes into light. Everything goes quiet. Across July 5th and the weeks after, Starcourt burns. The mayor is arrested. A local TV show runs a teaser for an investigation into 2 years of strange events. The Byers family leaves Hawkins. 11 goes with them because the cabin is empty without Hopper, and her powers are gone. In Russia, a prison guard feeds a man to a demogorgon and saves another prisoner for later. Months pass. The Byers arrive in Lenora Hills. Owens and Brenner build a project designed to restore what 11 lost. In Hawkins, Steve and Robin start over at a video store. At school, Dustin and Mike meet a senior named Eddie Munson and join a club that becomes a lightning rod for drama without trying. On Friday, March 21st, 1986, high school life and the larger problem collide. Lucas hits a game winner while his friends finish a Hellfire session upstairs. Earlier that day, Joyce opens a package that says Hopper is alive. That night, Eddie sells to Chrissy Cunningham in his trailer, and she dies in front of him without anyone touching her. Bones snap, eyes cloud. Eddie runs. The town wakes up to a murder that doesn't fit any pattern they understand, and the panic finds an easy target in the club they already don't like. On Saturday, March 22nd, Fred Benson dies on a road after seeing a vision he can't escape. In California, a roller rink stunt ends with a public blow to the face and a set of handcuffs. Owens intercepts the arrest and makes a pitch that sounds like the only path forward. In Hawkins, Max notices her own symptoms match Chrissy's and Fred's and admits the clock she keeps seeing isn't just a normal nightmare. In Alaska, Joyce and Murray chase a promise of a meeting that turns into a double cross and a drugged plane ride. The board is split across 3 states and a prison in Russia, and everyone is already in motion. On Sunday, March 23rd, Brenner resurfaces inside a program called Nina. 11 agrees to try because Hawkins won't survive round 2 without her to defend it. In Hawkins, the group traces the killings back to the Creel family history and lands on Victor Creel at Pennhurst. His story includes one detail that matters hugely later. Music cut through the hold on his mind. In town, Max writes goodbye letters and reads one at Billy's grave. Vecna pulls her into a red sky and starts the killing. Her friends put headphones on her and press play on the song that brings her back. She sprints through falling debris toward a window to reality and hits the grass breathing. On Monday, March 24th, the Desert Safe House comes under attack, and Agent Harmon dies after getting Mike, Will, Jonathan, and Argyle out with a number hidden in a pen. Murray and Joyce wake up, tied down by Yuri, and find their way to a crash landing in snow. Hopper breaks his ankle chains, escapes once, gets dragged back, and gets thrown into a ring with a Demogorgon in his future. Nancy and Robin talk their way into Pennhurst, get thrown out, and still extract the key idea that sound can break a hold. Inside Nina, 11 relives the lab from her childhood, learns control, and stops trying to run, because the way out requires going straight through what happened and not avoiding her trauma. On Tuesday, March 25th, the California group decodes the number and chases it to a location only Susie Bingham can help them pin down. The Hawkins crew breaks into the Creel house and maps how lights respond to something moving on the other side. In Russia, Hopper faces the Demogorgon with a burning spear. He lives long enough for Joyce and Murray to open a door from the control room and pull him through. The escape pauses in a warehouse where they learn that a part of the mind flayer is being studied in a glass cell, and that Demogorgons can be frozen and stored like inventory. The story stops being about one town and fully becomes a map with multiple battlefronts. On Wednesday, March 26th, into Thursday, March 27th, Hawkins turns on itself in a town hall meeting that blames the Hellfire Club for everything. Jason Carver turns fear into a campaign and points the crowd at Eddie. In Nevada, the military traces the Nina site and moves to end the project by force. Inside Nina, Brenner tries to keep control of a girl who doesn't need him anymore. Outside, a helicopter lines up a shot and loses the sky when she drags it into the desert below with one hand. The pizza van becomes a rolling lab where salt, water, and a plastic kiddie pool stand in for a tank. The plan is simple. If she can reach Max's mind from 1,000 miles away, they can change the outcome of what seemed like a certain fate. On the final day of the plan, everyone in Hawkins moves at once. Nancy, Steve, and Robin go through a gate to hunt Vecna. Eddie and Dustin get on a trailer roof and play loud enough to pull a swarm of bats away from the others. Lucas and Erica set up positions in the Creel house. Max sits down in the attic and offers herself as bait because she understands what this costs and wants the choice to be hers alone. In Russia, Hopper, Joyce, Murray, Dimitri, and Yuri go back into the prison on purpose because destroying creatures there will weaken the hive here. In Nevada, 11 stands with Max in a gym built from memory and refuses to let go. The minute hand crawls. Jason bursts into the attic at exactly the wrong time and breaks the headphones. Erica takes a hit outside. Eddie decides to buy more time and never makes it back as a result, giving himself up for the cause. In the Upside Down, bottles shatter, fire spreads, and a body built from grief and rage takes blow after blow. Vecna falls, but doesn't die. He tears open 4 gates that meet in the center of town and trigger a quake that splits Hawkins. The map changes overnight. 2 days after the quake, relief tents go up in a school gym while the group returns one by one. Dustin tells Eddie's uncle the real story because someone has to break through the rumors and let him know how much of a hero Eddie was at the end of it all. Robin fumbles through small talk with Vicky. Jonathan and Nancy dodge a conversation they need to have. Hopper walks through a cabin doorway, and the girl who thought she lost him forever holds on and won't let go. Max is alive but unconscious after flatlining and getting pulled back by a friend who won't accept the decision to end her life. An unsettling type of ash that isn't really ash floats over fields. The ground near the fault looks like it's rotting. Everyone knows what it means without saying it out loud. The fight's only been paused. It hasn't ended just yet. That's the full timeline from the 1950s to the present. It starts with a father and a son reaching where they shouldn't, runs through a program that turned kids into tools, and lands in a town that learned to build solutions out of spare parts and loyalty. Things are building towards a crazy and explosive finale for Season 5, but that's the story so far. Which event got you the most worked up? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more Stranger Things content and theories, click the video on screen now.